All right, Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. I've already done a video on this for like the basic accompaniment pattern. But this one is going to be just solo fingerstyle guitar, like alternating bass with a thumb, and then the melody on top, so it's a lot more challenging. First thing I want to go through with you is just the chords you're going to be using. I got a capo on 5, so I can play in the key of C, but I'm going to be using G shapes. So mostly like typical things you would expect for the key of G major, like this G, this version of the G, and E minor, like this 4-finger version. And it just alternates back and forth. We'll get into what to do with these chords in a minute, but you're going to use a C also. Use this one sometimes, and then a D as well. G over B is in there as well, but it's the same thing as G. We're just hitting the B in the bass instead of the G. Really, the only other chords we have in the song is if you didn't have a capo on, we'd be using an A bar chord shape. If there was no capo, it would be a C, and then we move up to a D with the shape, and then turn that D into like a D diminished chord. And once you have all the chords down, you can jump right into the first 2 measures, which are just kind of a simple rolling accompaniment pattern. And we're in 12/8 time, by the way, or you can think of it as 6/8 if you want to. But the important thing is you realize that we're in have that kind of swing flow, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and kind of group things that way. The accompaniment pattern is just rolling up and rolling back down. So you have thumb on the low E, and then fingers 1, 2, and 3 get the D, G, and B strings. Just roll up, then roll back down with the middle finger on that G string. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you have a little walk down to an F sharp for 6, and then you change to the E minor. And repeat the exact same pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then walk back up on that F sharp to get to the G to start over again. So that's the first 2 measures. When you reach this point, it would be on the end of the second measure on the 12th beat. You have to switch to where the melody comes in. So you still have your walk up to that F sharp, but you have to get this note, melody note right here on the first fret of the B string, and you have to hit that twice real quick for the melody. So I use my second and first fingers. And that leads you into the main next measure where the melody really gets started. And when you get to this point in the song, the bass line gets really predictable depending on what chord you're playing. So if you're playing a G chord, you're always going to be alternating between the low E and the D strings. You're always going to be playing the root and the fifth, alternating between the root and the fifth for the bass. So for the G chord, it's always going to be the low E and the D. For the E minor, it's always going to be the low 2 strings, just the E and the A string, because that's the root and the fifth. If you have a C chord, it's going to be the 5th string and the 3rd string, so the A string and the G string will give you the root and the 5th for the C. For the D, you can choose either the D and the G string or the D and the A string. Those will both give you roots and fifths, depending on what's going on in the melody. Which one will be easier, either that or that. But what I really recommend you do is go through the chord progression on the chart and just try to play the bass line by itself without even thinking about the melody at first. That'll help you concentrate on one thing and get it down so you don't have to tackle everything all at once. So something like this, starting on measure 2, then move to the E minor, back to the G, back to the E minor, and you have a C, and all the way up until beat 10, where you switch to a D for just 3 beats, and then back to a G, and then back to a D. And you can follow along on the tab with this. It'll make it a lot easier. And the next chord just goes back to a G, then D, and really it's all kind of the same stuff as far as the bass line goes until you get to the little tricky bit with the bar chords. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Let's talk about the melody first to go with this bass line. So you start it off with, then you move to your G. And all you do is stay on this 3rd fret of the B string for that first part of the melody. Then you move to the E minor, and then the melody goes to the open E string. Then the B string for the last beat of that measure. So, first beat of the 3rd measure. to another G chord. Da, da, da. Same melody note, 3rd fret of the B string. And then you have 2 quick melody notes on that same fret. Back to an E minor, same melody note on top, high E. And then you reach down here for the last melody note of that 4th measure with your pinky on the 3rd fret of the B string. So let me play those first 4 measures for you, just the accompaniment pattern starting. Then starts the melody. And the hardest thing here is keeping that thumb going. The more you practice that thumb on its own, being really accurate with the bass notes for those specific chords, the easier it will be to put the melody on top. Next measure moves to a C chord, so your bass notes go to an A and the G strings, and your melody note, main melody note for this measure is just the open high E. So then the melody note moves to the 3rd fret of the B string. So. And then you move to, what would be, I would think about it setting up for a D like sus2, because you're going to need a D7 here with a melody note as well. And the pattern is just, you only have 3 notes on the D, so that's your pattern for the thumb. And the melody note just moves back from the 3rd fret on the B to the 1st fret on the B string. That's why it's important to get set up like that. And then you move back to a G, and same melody note, 3rd fret, main melody note. And then you move back to a D, and you just kind of hold there on the low, the bass strings alternating until the very end of that measure where you have the pickup into the next measure. 2 quick 16th notes on the 3rd fret of the B string. So those 2 measures all together very slowly. I know I said very slowly, but it's really hard to play this slow once you have it learned. So just keep that in mind. Slow this way down, work on it just 1 measure, 1 beat at a time, and you'll get there. Even if you only do like a beat or 2 a day, you will get there. Next measure moves back to a G, and same melody notes to start, 3rd fret of the B string. It goes like this. Then you move to a C, melody notes on the high E string open. Then you move to a D, melody note, 2nd fret. It's a straight up D chord. And then you move to an E minor in the next measure, and your melody note is 3rd fret of the high E string. Then here's where it gets a little bit tricky. You have to switch to this C bar chord. And what I do, instead of playing the whole thing, I just play the root and the 5th here with my 1st and 2nd fingers, and then my melody note is the 3rd fret, same as from the E minor chord. Then switch to the bar chord. Then you have this melody note there, on what will be the 5th fret with your pinky, so. And then the very last note of that measure, melody note goes back to the 3rd fret that you're barring there. So measures 7 and 8 all together, starting on that G. From there, you saw that exact same shape up to what would be a D bar chord if you didn't have a capo on again. And kind of the same thing goes, you're still going to be doing root and 5th. Right there. And your melody note is just the note that you're already barring on the 5th fret. And then you switch to a D diminished chord. And all you do is go from this chord, you leave this intact, and you just put your pinky down right on that same fret is the 12th fret, and then your middle finger goes down up to what would be a D sharp, and I mean the actual note is an A flat, but you know what I mean, the whole capo thing. So And the melody is just opposing holly. So keep that bar down so you can get that melody note. And then there's a big shift to an E minor, but you have to have a big stretch here because of your melody note on top. So set up for normal what would be an E minor 7th, and then your two melody notes are going to be on the 3rd fret and the 5th fret. You just alternate between your low E and A strings. And then to get into the next measure, you have an open B string, and then the 3rd fret of the B string with your pinky. And so that whole measure with, let me go from the whole bar chord scenario that we can see how it all flows together. Slide up, diminish, then down to the E minor. And that gets you to the next measure. That's the hardest part of the song, guys. This gets you back into the next measure where you go to a C and things kind of return back to normal with the C chord, have that alternating on the A and G strings, and your melody notes just on top on the high E. Then your melody note switches to the 3rd fret of the B string, and then go to an E minor. Melody note on the open B string. At the end of that measure, your melody note goes up to the 3rd fret of that B string. So let me play those two measures for you. C to an E minor. Then move back to a C and kind of the same thing. And then you go to a G. The melody note is the open B. Then to a D. And this is where I use, the only D where I really use the open D and A strings, because my melody note is on that 2nd fret of the G string. So, and then I just return back into the kind of the accompaniment pattern. But I finish off by hitting the melody note, the open G string, and then I just start the accompaniment pattern again. Slow it down a little bit and then just walk down a scale, the G major scale, starting from 3rd fret, and I end up on that F sharp, and then just hit a G. But I like putting in the 9 or the 2 in there just to give it a little more kind of final, nice touch. And that's really it for this song. You may be thinking, Nate, that's it? Are you crazy? This is really tough. And yeah, I know it took me a long time to learn this tune, but anybody can do this. The way I figure out songs like this and make arrangements for this is just open up Guitar Pro, figure out the chords for the song, put them in, and then put a bass line in, then put the melody on top. And I may switch things around here and there to make things as easy to play as possible with open chords and things like that. But that's all I do. You can do it too. Guitar Pro is an awesome tool for that. No, this video is not sponsored, but if you need help with this stuff, if you need one-on-one lessons, you can always go to natesavage.com and book a private personal one-on-one lesson to where you can work on your fingerstyle stuff or just get a plan to figure it out for you to have success on the guitar. If you have any comments below with suggestions on what fingerstyle songs you'd like to see in the future, let me know. I've had 2 private lessons this week that actually gave me really good ideas for some cool fingerstyle arrangements. I'll be sharing those with you very shortly. See you later.